the Lore Lodge, someone who I've watched a few videos by recently, and they're an awesome individual. I like their content. If you haven't seen their content, I do absolutely recommend it, as we'll get into why here. We have today Lore Lodge presenting the Bell Witch American Folklore, which, from everything I've heard about the Bell Witch hauntings, has been a very interesting situation to delve into. I'm very curious what Lore Lodge brings to the table.
Today, we've got a story about witchcraft from Tennessee. I hope it rings a bell. I'm Aiden Mattis, and welcome to the Lore Lodge.
The pun, please! That was good. I like the logo,
In
too.
1804, John Bell moved with his family to Robertson County, Tennessee. They started a small farm in what is now Adams, Tennessee, and everything for the first decade and a half was going pretty well. Again, they moved in 1804, and nothing really started happening to them until 1817.
Right.
But when 1817 hit, just about everything that could possibly go wrong for the Bell family began to go wrong. Things started, as they always do, with strangeness regarding animals. It started when...
It's always the animal. I mean, that's one of those things that just, across any culture, across any people you come across, right? Like if you have a dog staring into a corner, or you have animals that are on edge, or animals that won't go into certain locations, right? Generally, that's a sign of something's there, whether that's, you know, something immaterial, whether that's something corporeal, you know, it depends. It could be that there's a gas leak, could be that there's mold growing there, could be something supernatural, you know, you could have something there that's an unwanted guest. You know, whether you're a believer, whether you're not a believer, that's really beside the point. Animals are built different for all intents and purposes, and just throughout history and stories, right, they are able to sense things that humans just simply can't a lot of the time. So at the very least, I mean, people that are mean to animals have other problems that go on and lead to other things. Be nice to animals.
And John
please.
Bell himself, the patriarch of the family, saw what he described as a misshapen black hound out in the cornfield. It was a dog with the head of a rabbit, and this disturbed him, so he
I don't think it's the Grim.
shot at it, and it ran off. Now, hopefully this would just be the end, but sadly, it wasn't. A member of his family's staff, because this was 1817, of course, and slavery was still a thing, a member of his staff, one of
As far as I'm aware, it was still legal in certain states up until, what, the early 90s? 2000s? I'd have to actually look into that. My sense of time is warped.
the women, I believe, one of the maids, reported that she had seen a giant disfigured bird flying over the property, and one of the slaves of the Bell family reported seeing a large black and disconcertingly appearing dog. So a number of strange animal appearances start this cascade of events.
I think that's one of those things that does lead credence to any sort of thing you can't explain, is quantifying it, right? If you have a family of 5 and you have the dad, you know, fire at this unknown hound entity, right? I mean, that's a singular event. Okay, you know, could have been a deer, could have been anything, right? But now, when you get other people start to experiencing the exact same thing, other people are seeing this weird misshapen dog, or even let's go into something like a haunted doll, right? An alleged haunting doll, where say if you're in possession of this doll, bad things will happen to you, or you'll start hearing whispers, or you'll find the doll in odd locations. We could also liken this to the Annabelle doll story. I'm so sorry for this pause chant moment, right? If you are in possession of this doll and, you know, you start seeing it show up in random places, you start hearing whispers, right? Okay, you know, there could be a number of things doing that. It could be neighbors, it could be, you know, technology that's left on, there could be a number of reasons, but the more people that come into contact with it, the more people that, you know, say it changes hands and they experience the exact same things, suddenly, you know, we have dots that are making a line. Something in some capacity is going on here. What that is, hard to say. Obviously, believer versus non-believer. Try to come to the reasonable, logical conclusions first before calling it the immaterial, right? So that's the best thing I can say, is quantify what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, and then try to find rationalization.
And it's worth mentioning that black dogs and black wolves are very common in Western European folklore as harbingers of doom. So the Bell family, being Western Europeans themselves, would likely have had an understanding of what this would mean in a cultural context. A black dog's appearance generally meant either you were in trouble, your family was in trouble, or it could go so far as to be that that black dog itself, for example, in the Welsh tradition, the gwychri, will just rip you to shreds if it sees you. In the
Some mythos around the world is kind of nutty.
English tradition, Black Shuck is more of a harbinger of doom, but the point is you have a lot of Anglo-Saxon and Celtic stories of black dogs that imply that something bad is about to happen to you.
Tamsin, you bring up an amazing point there. Could also be the knowledge of previous owners influencing the perception of current owners. I can tell you that these pills will cure your headache. Yep, they're just sugar pills. These pills will cure your headache. There is the argument of that and placebo as well. You know, just because I tell you these pills will cure your headache, is it curing your headache because you think they'll cure your headache and it's placebo, or because you have prior knowledge of, maybe that these help? It's entirely possible and something to consider. And so when quantifying data, making sure that there's no contamination or cross-contamination of data is paramount, right? If you're running a scientific study on, let's say, trying to find a good thing right now. Let's say you're trying to run a scientific study on public perception of uranium, right? Where public perception of uranium might be that it's, radioactive, but, let's say you're running it on a variant or isotope of uranium that might not be radioactive or less radioactive or safe to handle, right? And you were trying to run a social experiment on that. You would have to reasonably, make sure everyone signs their waivers, make sure everyone knows what's going on, because the monster experiment and the prison experiments, the ones where they're divided up into two groups, prisoner and guards, are incredibly logical reasons why we have waivers and stuff for experiments like that now. Oh my god. I took philosophy 101, and that part of it was actual psychological history, and that was a rough study. But I digress, right? And you have to make sure that, you're controlling variables. Have more people watch Kyle Hill content. Maybe the people that watch Kyle Hill content have a greater understanding of this and therefore would be outliers in regards to overall public perception. It's entirely possible. So yeah, having prior information can contaminate results of that.
And that seems to be exactly what was going on here. And then, of course, after the appearances of these strange animals, the very next thing to start happening was that they started hearing knocking on doors and outside of windows all around the outside of the house. Bell and his children, I believe there were 7 of them, might have been 6. But the people living in this house were John Bell, his wife, and their 6 or 7 kids, a number of boys and a number of girls.
Right.
Some of the main characters here are going to be Richard Bell and Betsy Bell, one of the sons and one of the daughters. And that's just important to keep in mind as we go deeper into this story. The next escalation after the set of knockings and rappings outside of the house was that the boys in their bedroom started to hear a number of what might call auditory apparitions. Mm-hmm. So they reported the sound of rats gnawing at the bedposts.
Rats!
They said they heard the sound of
ongoing channel meme is just screaming rats whenever rats come up.
Dogs fighting, and perhaps the most disconcerting of all, the sound of chains dragging across the floor. Now,
that one is a little strange. Because you can, if you hear knocking on a window, right? Or you hear knocking on doors, right? Okay, you can reasonably write that off as many, many things. Could be the wind, could be objects falling over, could be the house shifting even. I know in the house that I actually currently live in, so I'm actually bordering the laundry room, and for some reason, it's not anything like structurally bad or anything like that, but sometimes I'll just hear from the washer and dryer room just like thunk 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 thunk. It's the pipes just banging against the wall. Really funny when you're trying to get sleep at 6 in the morning. It's just here smack 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 smack, and I think it's water moving through the pipe, something like that. It's not the integrity isn't in question. It's just a feature. It's just I live around it. Right? It could be things like that have a logical, reasonable, rational explanation, but you can't necessarily explain. Dogs fighting out. A lot of things happen outside. I actually keep my windows closed at night now, just hearing too many stories about Appalachia. And even then, it's honestly just good protocol, right? There are reasons, there are areas you can absolutely have your windows open in. Let's just off the logical assumption here that if the window is open, things outside can see you. You know what human factors can see you? Serial killers. People that maybe you don't want to see. Like, there's people that I absolutely never want to see again for various reasons, and I have valid reasons for not wanting to see them again, right? And I don't want people seeing me. It's not that I'm worried about a Grimm. It's not that I'm worried about a Skinwalker. It's not that I'm worried about any of these things. It's that whatever's out there that I really can't see, I don't want whoever or whatever looking in and seeing me. And that's just kind of a security thing at this point, right? And that's not to say that, you know, all people are deranged, not all people mean ill, anything like that, because there are people that do mean good in this world. It's the nature of humanity: light, dark, good, evil, order, chaos. You know, it's in spectrums of these. I just, you know, don't want to take that chance. Let's put it that way. Water softening systems make strange noises as well with the pipes, inconsistent rhythm and such. Right, and see, there's another logical explanation for some of these things. And now we get to the chains. That is a very distinct sound. Like, because you've heard chains, right? Whether you've had plastic chains that you work maybe with at work sites, maybe you work with actual chains, right? When you hear a chain fall, when you hear chains hit the ground, right? How they have that kind of like staggered, like you have the main hit kind of, and then you have those staggered links hitting, right? And then how they drag across. That's a very unique and distinct sound. Not to say that something else couldn't mimic that sound, not to say that at all, not to say some of this was auditory hallucinations onset by something, chemicals, anything like that. That, especially if people aren't talking to each other, going back to our prior statement on quantifying information, that leads into something that, okay, something's up here. Something is making this, and we need to figure out what it is. And so, thus, as you can see, whereas I've made my bias known that, yeah, no, clearly, you know, I research things, you know, like Appalachia, like things like that, right? I try to approach this with a reasonable and logical conclusion first. That way we can try to debunk anything before immediately just saying, oh, well, it's this, and then being able to be disproven later.
Now, anytime they would go to investigate any of these strange sounds, as soon as they would light a candle or something, the sounds would stop. So whatever was going on, it did not like light. They did not notice these things during the day. So anytime a candle was
I'm curious how you would test that correlation and what time frame this was done over. Like, if this was done once a night over the course of, say, a week, that could have room for error. Or was this done, say, maybe on a single night session, and every time you extinguish the candle, then you would drag it, or then it would start dragging chains, and you light it again, right? I'm very curious on the constraints of the experiments you'd have to run.
Or a lantern, even if there wasn't electricity, you would have at least some sort of light source, and when these were extinguished, the happenings would occur again. Now, at this point in the story, you might think, oh, well, things at least go away when the lights come on. But it goes from apparitions and noises and just strange things that are disconcerting but not necessarily a physical problem to very legitimate physical problems. John Bell started to develop facial twitches, paralysis. He said that he felt as though there was a stick inside of his mouth at a perpendicular angle to his tongue.
Interesting.
That was holding his cheeks apart like this.
Interesting.
Oh, this would be very uncomfortable. I would not appreciate this.
No, that'd feel awful.
He had trouble swallowing. His tongue felt like it didn't fit right in his mouth. And eventually those twitches that had started in his face spread to the rest of his body.
So I guess from a modern science standpoint, you could say that something neurological is going on here, maybe with swelling, maybe even thyroid potentially. It's like, obviously there's modern stance you can take on this. This is not me belittling his experience by any means, right? It's trying to find rationalization in it to further compound on this. And it depends if he's the only one being experienced, if, you know, he had a history of this, was prone to this, which in the early 1800s, we didn't really have those medical records, at least the capacity that we do today.
And now, if you're at all into toxicology, this all may sound a little bit familiar to you, because all of these are symptoms of heavy metal poisoning.
Interesting.
Or certain chemicals. One of the ones that was commonly suggested was, oh, well, it was probably lead. But if it were lead, then John probably would have recovered, because he didn't seem to have been poisoned with enough lead to kill him.
Right.
And the lethal dose for lead is, I believe, 21 grams. What is more likely...
Doesn't lead poisoning also have mental deteriorative effects? If I understand it correctly, lead has... It affects your brain in some capacity where you can see deterioration.
A very common rat poison of the time, arsenic, was likely the culprit. Assuming, that is, that it was not witchcraft. Now, this is one of the parts of the story that I want to emphasize has a rational explanation.
Okay, yeah.
His convulsions...
So let me take a second to just acknowledge Lore Lodge for this. That he inserts this could be a rational explanation for this, where I've absolutely come across other YouTubers that go on like, oh, the Russian sleep experiment or something like that, and so, use it as fact. And it's like, mate, isn't this just a creepypasta that's been posted around time and time again? I'm like 99.9% certain the Russian sleep experiment, in the capacity that it is presented in the creepypasta copypasta, is not accurate. That's not to say that there's a grain of truth in it, right? Because there could be. All story, all media takes inspiration from somewhere. I just want to like give special recognition that this was done, because oh my god, I don't see that a whole hell of a lot, and that is great.
Problems, those could all have been symptoms of arsenic poisoning. Now, we don't have confirmation that he was suffering from arsenic poisoning starting in 1817.
No, I don't think we would.
But we do know that when he died in 1820, there were absolutely signs of arsenic poisoning.
Interesting.
Most importantly, there was a glass vial that they found in John Bell's room that contained a cloudy liquid that was dark in color, and when they fed it to the family cat, it killed the cat.
What?
Now, the reason it killed the cat so fast, but wouldn't kill John Bell immediately if it was arsenic, is that the way that humans and cats metabolize arsenic is different. They don't...
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, right, rats are susceptible to rat poisoning because apparently they can't regurgitate or something like. So they eat it and they can't expel it. They can't get rid of it in a timely fashion. Whereas humans, we can regurgitate things pretty easily.
Metabolize it at all. It just goes straight into their blood and kills them. With humans, it actually gets filtered out by our liver,
right.
And so it requires a much higher dose and often higher consistency in order to take a negative effect like death. But the rest of the problems John Bell was experiencing do sound like they could have been arsenic poisoning. Now, in 1817, when all of this started to occur, the Bells wanted to keep it a secret. This was very unseemly for that period. You didn't want to tell people that you were suffering from some sort of supernatural or paranormal occurrence. Not because people were less superstitious than they are now. In fact,
no, I mean, wouldn't they ostracize you, or they would jump to conclusions that maybe you don't want to? I mean, it depends on the society back then.
They were far more superstitious. But because if you were the victim of witchcraft, it was going to make people avoid you. They didn't know if it was your fault. They didn't know if you were actually the one doing it and you were just trying to displace.
So this is one of those things that I'm going to say that I probably don't want comments regarding the reasoning because of what that could open myself up to, right? I kind of want to look into the reasoning on the persecution and the societal stigma against witchcraft, especially at the time, because I mean it's just the latest thing that a lot of people were just like. I think part of it actually relates to the fear of the unknown, right? Where you don't know if something works, so therefore you're inherently biased against it. But I mean, it's also a subject that starts bordering on religion, which politics and religion are two things that I really, really try to avoid talking about. I can speak on it from a social aspect of, people not necessarily understanding, people maybe hearing stories through the grapevine or current public perception regarding witchcraft and witches, and then it, spiraling from there. And I mean, even then we had the satanic panic of like the 90s or say 80s, right? And it's just very interesting in regards to how society perceives some of these things, because it also could just be the vocal minority people latch onto, right? Like, what do we call it? Like someone like Sneeko doesn't speak for all men, right? Things that Sneeko says, I would never say it in like a million years, right? It just does not cross my brain. So, I mean, it could be that you have figures, and this is obviously deviating from the witchcraft argument, figures like Aleister Crowley in the 80s, right? Who was he was 60s, wasn't he? He was 60s. Aleister Crowley was interesting because of what imagery he modified and in what ways he did it and with what intent he did it. And that's not necessarily indicative of not only that practice, but other practices as well. So it could just be the minority. Interesting. Just musing with Kip.
So people, if they found out that you were having a witchcraft problem, were probably going to...
Let's put it this way. I'm being reserved on what I speak on Crowley because I know how he's wild. I've seen some of what he's drawn, and I can mechanically understand what he was going for. Like, obviously, YouTube rabbit holes, you end up watching interesting and weird things, right? But I'm not researched enough to really have a comment on him, if that makes sense.
Keep you at arm's length. But eventually all of this came to a head and they were unable to keep it a secret any longer. So they invited their neighbors, the Johnstons, to stay the night and had a nice little sleepover. This chapter of
Tamsin says a big part of it was a book called Malleus Maleficarum. That's definitely Latin. That was about the evils of witchcraft. People back then thought it was from a religious leader, but it was not endorsed by any religious institution that I know of. Interesting. I'll have to look into this book and how it affected public perception. Thanks for citing that.
the story is the illustrious Bell Johnston slumber party of 1818.
Mhm.
So the Johnstons and the Bells had a nice dinner, they had some discussion, everything was going according to plan, everything was going great, and then they all went to bed, and that's when things start to get hairy.
Right.
The first thing that happened was, as soon as the lights in the house, the candles and whatnot, were extinguished, they started hearing the noises, and the Johnstons heard it too. Now, to be clear, Bell had told the Johnstons something was going on, but to my understanding, he did not tell them exactly what was going on. Just that something was strange, and he wanted them to come over for a night and see if they experienced it too.
That could also bias results, though. Like, it's good that he's not fully disclosing what it is he's looking for, but it still could bias people towards something. But, I mean, to be fair, for the time period, I mean, this is as fair as we're going to get, I feel.
And they sure as hell did, because there were noises, there was whispering, there was, at some point in the night, they said that they believed that something came into their room. Now, this was a physical entity, according to them, but it was not a visible physical entity. So some sort of force came into the room, and according to the Johnstons, ripped the bedding off of their bed while they were in it. So after this experience, what Johnston did was he said, no, you should tell everyone. I communicated with it. You should tell everyone. This is an entity that needs to be heard. And so reluctantly, Bell went along with it. And the end result of this was that people from all over the county of Robertson started coming over to the Bell household to interact with this entity, to ask it.
Right, as people will. I love seeing the videos on social media, specifically the ones that white people are crazy, as a white person. White people are crazy. They just don't want to find the ghost. They want to find the biggest, baddest ghost. They want to find the dude that, like, took out an entire town with a spoon. And it's so true. It's not that you want to find a ghost. It's not when you find the supernatural. You want to find the ghost or the supernatural.
Questions and to commune with it, which, if you know anything about demonology, is a horrible, terrible idea, because it's just going to give the thing more energy and more power as more and more people pay attention.
I can see that, yeah.
Which, if this is what was going on, it seems very much like whatever this presence was intelligent and was deliberately manipulating the Bells and the Johnstons in order to gain more power. And that becomes very clear very quickly, because the next thing that happened was that the witch, so to speak, the entity, started speaking. And it started speaking because...
Of course, this is the logical progression, yeah. I mean, so at that point, because these are the people I've come across, right? These are the people that I've known. I could, at that point, it's like, calls up person, hey, yeah, so there's this thing, and it's just doing these things. Them, ask several questions. Me, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much that's what I'm experiencing. Them, okay, I'll be over in a minute. They're done in 15 minutes, and it's like, cool, you shouldn't experience it. These are the people I like keeping on hand, because, like, even if I don't know everything, sometimes these people are very interesting just to talk to. I always love people with a mass amount of information. Obviously, that is, disclaimer, obviously you have things that you're under NDA that you cannot discuss, or things that are under OPSEC that you cannot discuss. Not that you would disclose it, just saying don't ever disclose that. I want to know things, but I don't want to know things that bad, if that makes sense, especially if it's going to endanger somebody or people or property or things.
Were coming to the house and praying for the Bells. And then the entity started to join in the prayers. And according to people who came to the house, and the writings of Richard Bell, one of John Bell's sons, according to him, people came to the house and would communicate with the being, with the entity, and when they did, it started to talk even more. It started to have complex theological discussions with pastors and holy men who would come to interact with it. And just over time,
Damn, if this... Alleging this is true. Man, if this didn't have dire consequences, I would love to have a several-hour theological discussion with an underworldly entity. But, generally ones like these are probably not on the side of things you want to discuss with or be around for any lengthy capacity, if that makes sense. To be fair, Code Geass episode Archie episode 21, the Ragnarok connection where Lelouch and Charles are having that discussion outside of reality effectively. I'm a huge sucker for any trope like that. Even the ending of Wheel of Time, which watched a quick summary of Wheel of Time, how Baalzamon and Rand were talking outside of reality, looking in and just having discussions. Oh, I am such a sucker for those types of tropes and discussions.
It had the kind of the opposite of what we normally associate with things from other realms, the evil spirits of the world. Usually prayer, whether it be Christian or non-Christian, prayer is generally supposed to weaken them or to...
This is at least public perception at the very least. Malleus Maleficarum was actually condemned by the Catholic Inquisition after its 1486 for its recommendations being illegal and immoral and being inconsistent with Catholic doctrine. That is fascinating, Tamsin. I absolutely love knowing that this is a thing now. Interesting. Person to learn. You know what? I actually really don't want to know. That is also true. Humans are very curious creatures by nature. And also, here's the thing as well. If there was an entity like this that was having complex theological and philosophical discussions with, leaders of faith, as you will, right? Who's to say that the information that they're giving is wholly truthful? Who's to say that there's not an agenda? Who's to say that it's not just trying to get your name? Not just your name, your name. Interesting things with Kip, ladies and gentlemen, and non-binary peeps.
Bother them or to banish them. In this case, it seems that the entity, whatever it was, enjoyed the prayer and enjoyed the discussion.
Interesting.
Had a good time talking with these pastors and these holy men. So it's very strange. That's out of place. And it's why the more I read into this story, the more I did my research, the less I was thinking witchcraft. Witchcraft made less and less sense the longer this went on.
I don't think it is now.
What made a hell of a lot more sense to me personally was a demonic entity, but we'll get into that. Now, when the entity first spoke, it did something very deliberate and very distinct.
Okay.
It recited the prayer that Johnston himself had recited that first night that it communicated with him.
I don't think this is witchcraft. I don't. Like, the people I've talked to, the little I understand on the practice, I don't see it as witchcraft specific. I just don't see it. And that's not being like, oh, witchcraft is wholly anti, oh, well, prayer, Christian Catholic prayers are going to drive. No, like, no. Demon, maybe? Maybe? He did bring up demonology. But even then, I'm just fascinated by the classification at this point. That's interesting.
In his voice, from nowhere. Everyone in the room just heard it talking. But the longer that this whole praying thing went on, the more people started to get skeptical. Why was this entity, why was this being that had ostensibly for so long been terrible?
It's like that, or what class of demon? Someone break out the 12 keys of Solomon. Actually, probably don't. No, that's interesting though, right? Like, that's like, I'm looking at this, right? And I'm going back through everything I've seen, heard, experienced, discussed. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. This isn't the same. These aren't equivocal. There's something else at play here. Assuming at the very least that is a paranormal interaction, right? Going down the rabbit hole of entertaining the idea that this is paranormal in some capacity, right? Demon or some sort of sort of spirit in general, incorporeal. It does get, it's at phasmophobia terms, it's a social ghost, right? People are coming and giving it attention, giving it energy ghoul, or maybe advanced poltergeist. Maybe. But it's not averse to any of the Christian media brought in, right? And that's the thing that's interesting about it.
Terrorizing the Bell family, why was it now interested in playing nice? And as people started to feel this way more and more, the veil dropped. The entity began describing itself as a spirit from everywhere. It was in the air, it was from heaven, it was from hell, and it wanted to kill John. That was its specific goal.
Why?
It wanted to kill John Bell. And
it's a summon. I don't know what brings me to that logic. It's a summon. Interesting.
The thing is, the more people communicated with, the more they asked questions, the more it kind of confused things and muddied the waters.
Right.
At one point, the spirit claimed that there had been a Native American burial ground on the Bell's land that was disturbed, and it was the spirit of a Native American boy. At another point, it said that it was the spirit of a wealthy immigrant who had buried treasure on the land. And since
this could be true and untrue at the same time. I always am very respectful of Native American burial grounds and tradition. That's why I really don't talk about a lot of it, because I'm one unread too. I want to be respectful, and I think pop culture has a little bit of disrespect towards it. But I digress. It could be so this could either be evidence that whatever this is lying, or evidence that it's telling the truth, because that ties into I am everywhere, I am this, this, and this. And it would be telling the truth if it was many things. Fascinating.
The treasure had gone undiscovered. It was trying to tell people where it was. There was the fact that it said it was millions of years old at a time when people didn't really believe the Earth to be millions of years old. They believed, for the most part, that it was
right?
some collection of thousands of years old.
Yeah.
Now, for this entity to be saying, I'm from heaven and hell and everywhere, and I'm also millions of years old, that definitely pushes things more towards the demonic side.
This was Tennessee, so this wasn't Appalachia, right? That's North Carolina. Well, I mean, obviously mountain range stretches. This wouldn't be Appalachia area. I hear those mountains are old.
But what people really latched onto was not demonology. It was not entities. It was not experiences like that.
Uh-huh.
It was the fact that one thing that the ghost said, the entity said, was that it was the witchcraft creation of one of their neighbors, Kate Batts.
What did I just say about it being a summon? What did I just say about it being a summon?
Batts was a witch, and that she had cursed the Bell family and was torturing them with this entity that she summoned from another world, which, again, assuming that that's actually what it said to them and not just something John Bell made up because he and Kate Batts were in some sort of economic dispute, which I know they were, and this is in the court records of the time. But if it were something where it was saying it was the witch of Kate Batts, which is, to my understanding, how it described itself, it doesn't make a ton of sense that Batts would be appearing in another form or projecting, so to speak.
No.
What it sounds like to me, based on, again, what this says, is that
Tennessee is just west of Appalachians. Like, its border is miles from the feet of the range. It's still from a very old part of the world, I guess. I can justify that, yeah.
Dealing with, if let's say Batts was a witch, that she summoned something.
Allegedly.
She summoned a demon.
I'm going to take that W, chat. I'm going to take that W right now.
Not that she was going and doing this herself, but rather she had brought something into the world to terrorize the Bell family. Regardless, people began referring to the witch as Kate, much to the chagrin of Kate Batts. She was not happy about this, and she lived the rest of her life under the suspicion that she was actually a witch, which got her ostracized from a lot of community-related events.
This is also under the assumption that she is one, and then it obviously comes down to what her practice was, what it could theoretically be. Like, there's so much there that I'm underread on.
Sometime between 1817 and 1820, Betsy Bell, one of John's daughters, became engaged to Joshua Gardner, one of the neighbors. And it seems that the Bell Witch did not take kindly to this. This entity started scratching and poking Betsy with pins and bothering her with horrific noises and whisperings, and it just kind of terrorized her and tormented her, and its goal seemed to be to get her to break off this engagement with Joshua Gardner. And it didn't stop. It just kept going for 3 years, until eventually in 1821, Betsy, distraught over the fact that she just was not able to escape this thing, found that the best option she had was to end the engagement. And as far as the record goes, that is when the Bell Witch stopped causing a problem.
Interesting.
And that's because it also achieved its other goal in 1820, which was to kill John Bell. John Bell died ostensibly of poisoning. The witch, the entity, claimed credit for it. And while it's possible that he was poisoned by a member of his family or one of his slaves, or even just an enemy from somewhere in town, it did get pinned on the witch. And there's enough aspects of this story that are explainable.
I mean, we see this in modern society even well. We don't understand something, or people don't understand something, so they will claim it is something and claim that correlation can be causation and not necessarily understand that it might not be.
To kind of write them off, but at the end of the day, there are some aspects that don't make a ton of sense. Everyone in this family reported hearing the apparitions. Everyone in this family saw something strange on the property. They all heard the knocking on the doors. All of them reported interacting with the entity. We have people who are not in the family who reportedly interacted with the entity. And there's a journal from an army captain, oddly enough named John Bell, who was a different John Bell entirely, who traveled all the way from the Great Plains back to Tennessee so that he could go and see Betsy and see how she was communicating with this otherworldly spirit. Because apparently this was actually something that had become rather well known. John Bell traveled all the way from the Dakotas to Tennessee just to witness this.
That's back then. Like, that's not like you hop in your pickup and start driving. That's a trip.
And according to legend, even President Andrew Jackson came to see, even though he was not president at the time. At the time, he was just a general.
I think I've heard of this, yeah. I've heard of Andrew Jackson allegedly spending a night with this Bell Witch entity.
The U.S. Army. So, Jackson supposedly came to interact with the witch, and one of his soldiers supposedly shot at it with a silver bullet, but all of this seems to be apocryphal. There's no real evidence of it outside of Richard Bell's writings. I feel like a visit by Andrew Jackson at this time probably would have gotten better
Might
coverage,
have garnered a little more
although
attention.
It's not entirely improbable that Jackson would have visited Bell's property because the Jacksons owned property near the Bells.
Yeah.
And considering they were all wealthy landowners, it would make sense for them to know each other. But at the end of the day, we don't have a ton of evidence that ever actually occurred. So, of course, in 1820, John Bell dies. In 1821, Betsy Bell breaks off her engagement, and the Bell Witch seems to die down for a little while. Nobody else really reports problems with it, although the property itself continues to have a odd feeling to it. And the Bell family, to this day, they're still kicking. Obviously not any of these individuals, but they've passed down all the stories through their family. They take it seriously, and the locals of the area also take it seriously. And of course, a movie was made out of this, a book was made out of this. But what I want to go over just for the end of this video is my theories on what this could be.
Yeah.
Because the obvious theory is witchcraft. Kate Batts.
I'm curious what he thinks it is. I'm curious what rational explanations he can bring to the table.
Playing with spirits. Now, it's also possible that John Bell himself was the witch and summoned something he didn't know how to handle, and he ended up blaming it on Kate. Or it was another family member. Or it was one of the slaves on the property. You never know.
That's possible, actually. Yeah. It's kind of like being the imposter in Among Us and hitting the emergency meeting button. You're self-reporting and trying to pin it on someone else, yeah.
A million possibilities for witchcraft in this scenario, but the things that happen don't quite fit with witchcraft alone. It doesn't sound like just hexing somebody or something like that. What this sounds like is a demonic infestation, but at the same time, a demonic infestation does not rule out witchcraft, because a witch could summon a demon and bind it and have it do its bidding. So that brings me to my next one, which is a demonic entity. Why would there be a demonic entity in western Tennessee? I don't really know. But it does sound like...
I mean, to be fair, weirder things have happened. Reality is stranger than fiction, remember. Weirder things have happened in reality. Like, just everyday, mundane normalcy than do in some of these legends and folklore.
It was there, because everything here fits with that. You've got strange noises, strange apparitions, strange smells. You've got symptoms that can't be explained. You've got something that, most importantly out of all of this, seemed to have a good, solid grasp on Christian theology, which is not something that your average witch would have. So it makes sense under the circumstances of this thing saying that it is from heaven, hell, and the earth, that is in the air, and that it is millions of years old. That all sounds extraordinarily demonic to me. That fits point for point with Judeo-Christian demonology. Other possibilities. It could have been a ghost, or a number of ghosts. Again, this is a property where slaves lived and died. I would not be surprised if a few of them weren't super happy with those circumstances and stuck around a little while just to bother the Bells. That said, ghosts killing people is rather rare in non-horror movie depictions of ghosts. People rarely report dying to these things unless it was something like being pushed. They don't really seem to cause illness. And I've certainly never heard of a ghost poisoning somebody. Now, there was, of course...
I don't know on that one, though. Like, I mean, obviously, you have to take these with a grain of salt, right? How apparently... Because people are fucking insane. Apparently, people have been, like, buying Dybbuk boxes online and unboxing that. Why? Like, let me just... From just a completely, like, mundane perspective, what reason would you possibly have to purchase something that is marketed as a Dybbuk box? Spend money on something just to open it and find a couple objects. What logical reason is there? Don't forget pink sauce thing. Yeah, reality is stranger than fiction, right? Like... And when that's not even talking about what a Dybbuk box is, what it, could potentially house, people that have allegedly opened Dybbuk boxes and had interesting events happen to them, right? Like, why? What possible logical reason would you have to purchase what is marketed as a mystical and or occult item, because that's how you would market that on like eBay or something, and you would crack open the wax seal and open it? Like, why? I see a lot of people asking in chat about Dybbuk box. We might have to do a reaction on it. I don't have enough formal understanding of it. I have a vague understanding of it, but I don't have enough of a formal understanding, and I don't want to misrepresent what it is, especially because it does lean itself into religion in some capacity,
the possibility,
or at least belief systems.
Land. There are apocryphal stories that after the colonists came in and settled the territory, which had formerly belonged to the Cherokee people, that the Native Americans cursed the land, and maybe...
Let's actually go a step further. Okay, so from a logical standpoint, right? You say you have enough money to buy. Say you have $1 million, right? You're ready to go buy a house. And you go to this area, and there's not a lot of people living in this area. And every now and again, you kind of just see smoke rising from the ground. But the housing prices are decent, right? Housing prices are pretty okay. But you're looking at it, and you go, I don't know about this. Why is there smoke from the ground? And people are just like, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's just the area, right? People that have done a lot of YouTube digging history even know that I'm specifically trying to paint a picture of I can't remember the town specifically. It's the town where the coal mine caught fire and it's burning under the town, which kind of causes the road to kind of do things. But smoke happens, right? And like from a completely mundane perspective, if you're looking at something and something don't feel right, why are you going to do it? I think that town specifically has like 8 residents left, last I checked, and I don't think you can buy into that town anymore because there's an active coal fire going on under the town, right? But from a completely logical, reasonable, mundane perspective, you look at something doesn't look right, why are you going to bother, right? We can just even exclude the whole Dybbuk box argument. Centralia, Pennsylvania, yes, that one. Yeah, no, it's yeah. If it doesn't necessarily have to be haunted, just from a logical perspective, why do it?
Bell just happened to wander onto a specific spot that
I don't think I've seen a waterlogged salt mine.
Or there's, of course, the possibility of Native American witchcraft, aka something along the lines of a skinwalker. And even though we're outside...
I am underqualified to talk on if that is classified as witchcraft or if that is Native American belief or sectionalized Native American belief. I will definitely state my underread nature in that field specifically.
Side of the southwestern United States here, while the Navajo skinwalker tradition is the best known, it's
Amber,
not
thank you for the bits.
One. And there were other tribes that practiced similar rituals across the southern United States. And is it possible that a Cherokee skinwalker existed? It's not out of the question. It might not fit within the, modern version or even the recorded version of the lore.
Yeah, modern pop culture could have perverted it as well. What was it? Was it Antlers? What was the stupid movie that came out in the past couple years didn't have the Wendigo in it, and it was about this dad or someone who was trying to save his family member in a cave, and he became the Wendigo or something like that. I can't remember the name of the movie, but that, as far as I'm aware, is also removed from the source material as well. And that's where it starts getting murky when you start talking about, anyone can claim, oh, well, this is Native American belief, and oh, well, this is traditional witchcraft, and make a TikTok video where they're pulling tarot saying this has found you. There's no hashtags on this. This is what this is. Oh, I'm pulling this. You need to be careful of this, mate. What I'm trying to say is anyone can make claims. It's backing that up and speaking with people that are educated in the field or have citations that they can provide to know what you're dealing with, right? Does that make sense? Am I making sense? No, it's not Pet Sematary. It was a movie in the past 2 years.
But it's entirely possible. These were all peoples practicing similar shamanistic religions, if not exactly the same. So they all would have had rituals, and they entirely possibly could have had rituals that were reflections or that they...
On the subject of finding actual evidence, I've been open that if I was ever able to go to Christopher Lee's library, Sir Christopher Lee, excuse me, if I was ever able to go to his occult library, I would do so in a heartbeat. That library fascinates me. I would love to go there.
They had traded with one another, and when you take into account the strange-looking bird and the dog with the head of a rabbit and the scary black hound with the glowing yellow eyes,
I see
those all do sound a little bit like Skinwalker stories to me.
I can see where this is coming from.
But personally, I still fall very much on the side that this was one of two things. Either it was a hoax, or it was a demon. Either way, I think it's a fascinating story, and I would love to go check it out. This is one of America's most prominent ghost stories, and I think that's super interesting.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know your thoughts. So if you have thoughts, if you have a story related to this, if you're from Tennessee, go ahead and leave a comment. Let us know what you think, and we will happily read through all of them. And if we like one particularly, we'll even pin it. If you have a good story, we'll pin it so everybody gets to read, because we love you. And also because we love you, please smash the like button, notification bell, subscribe,
mass hysteria.
I don't know,
right, and that could be. Depends on the area, right?
Smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and if you want more content, check us out on Patreon, TikTok, and Instagram. I'm Aiden Mattis, and thanks for stopping by the Lore Lodge.
Sorry, content you've seen chill here takes some of my Monster Can budget. I appreciate that, Amber. Thank you for the bits once more. I definitely appreciate that. No, and it's entirely possible. You could have mass hysteria. You could have... There is both reasonable there's both reasonable explanations, both physical and mundane, and immaterial and supernatural. There's arguments that can be made for both from the information presented and what information, as far as presented in this video, that we know. So, no, it's not Wendigo from 2001. It was in the past couple of years. Someone's gonna know. I can't remember it off. Angry Joe did a video review on it. It was pretty popular back in the last couple of years. We're gonna skip ahead a little bit. I want to see what he has after the fact. No, I'm loving the Lore Lodge's content. He puts out really good content.
Today we've got a story about witchcraft from Tennessee. I hope it rings a bell. I'm Aiden Mattis, and welcome to the Lore Lodge.
So good.
You get it because it's about the Bell Witch.
Yeah.
Got him.
Good one, right?
It's so good.
that little bit should go in at the end.
Yes.
Yes.
I love it. I love that he did that.
Okay.
No, this is cool. This was cool.
In 1804.
I'm loving their content. As you can see, Lore Lodge is doing there seems to be an updated one as of 6 days ago as of filming this. Generally longer content, more long form content, if that's something that you're into. This was awesome. I loved watching this. I think he's a pretty cool guy. I think he's pretty personable. Loving his stuff. And I absolutely do recommend that you go check him out. That's part of the React content is creators that people might not have seen, or people that I feel are incredibly underrated. Kind of getting them out there into different spheres and saying, hey, this person exists, that kind of thing. But I absolutely love this. What are your thoughts on this 2022 movie called The Wendigo? I think it's that one. I do think it's that movie, yes. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that there's a completely reasonable, rational, mundane explanation for this? Do you think that there is a supernatural element to it? If you think that there's a supernatural element to it, what sort of classification do you think it is? Do you agree with that it's some sort of summon in regards to, agreeing with Kip? Do you think that it necessarily is something else? And if what else that thing is. What do you think? Do you have any of your own personal spook stories, or do you live in an area? Obviously, please observe anonymity where you can. Right? Don't want anyone to get doxxed. That would not be bueno. Do you have any spooky stories to share yourself? Let me know. If you like this kind of spooky content, I can try to make this more of a mainstay thing. We are doing Spooktober over not only October, but November as well, just because there's a lot of content I want to get through. And I definitely thank each and every one of you for coming out. Let me know all that fun stuff, and I will see you in the next one.